Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
I'm Dr. Mark Davini. Hello.
Okay, we're going to have to fake our way through this episode because I don't know if we have this.
Well, speak for yourself. We're gonna entitle it "Smart is Hard." So for all our non-Massachusetts people, Paul might have to translate that for you.
Smart is hard.
And what are we talking about?
Emotional intelligence?
Oh, all right. So yeah, maybe it could be a problem for you.
For me. Wow. Wow. I'm out of here. Screw you.
And that's the whole podcast right there. We're done.
Mom.
Oh my God. There we go. Everything else we're going to say is just to reiterate what just happened in the last 30 seconds.
Exactly. Okay. So, all right.
Define it. Define it for me.
It is the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and influence emotions both in oneself and in others. Now, when you say in others, are you talking about manipulating? Because it sounds an awful lot like manipulation.
No, recognizing and working with. How's that?
I see. Being diplomacy, perhaps?
Yeah,
part of that?
That's definitely part of it. I mean, there are key components to emotional intelligence. And let's face it, we could, spend 2-day seminar on this, which they're out there. So, and I would highly recommend that you do that because this has become where we are today, especially say someone from my perspective, where I have so many generations that I work with.
So many.
Where I work with, and they are all different, and they are all different on this emotional intelligence quotient scale. Okay.
Well, I mean, you are an expert having lived through all those generations yourself.
All generations yes. When they started labeling them by letters, there was a point there where they didn't do that. We were baby boomers, which is interesting, since I don't have any children.
Well,
so I didn't boom in the baby time, right? But there are certain key components that we need to be aware of if we're going to entertain the concept of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness. You can't expect to recognize and work with other people if you don't know who you are yourself. So it is that self-awareness that becomes a critical element.
I don't think introspection is a very overutilized characteristic today. I don't know if I won't say a lot of people, but I think that introspection can be difficult because
very.
And
always.
Is it learned? Is it something that you pick up? Like I wonder with the younger generations how much of that is lost or not lost.
Yeah, that's perfect because they'll look at things and never feel as if there's a need to look into themselves. And I don't know where that comes from necessarily. It's probably more of a combination of everything in the world, but a lot of it comes from the fact that everything is semi-provided for you. And it's easy.
Well, there's
accessible.
a term that came out of that. Helicopter mom came out of this, right? And this isn't to blame moms or dads individually, but when you don't get coping skills as a kid because the default is to defend you. Like if I got in trouble and I had to go to the principal's office, my mom wasn't coming to school to defend me. Heck no. That was not happening.
Yeah, I went to parochial schools. It was the same way. If they said you did something wrong, you must have done something wrong. And that wasn't always the case. But
as a kid, feeling that was unfair because maybe you didn't do it, maybe it wasn't your fault, but it was a tough life lesson that life isn't always fair. And how do you handle that? How do you cope with that?
And I remember when I was in grammar school, and of course back then in parochial grammar schools, if one person did something wrong, the whole class got punished. So there was
military.
It was. And so I remember when the nun walked out of the room And, you're not supposed to talk.
Speaking of a joke, the nun walks out of the room.
No, it might, but the nun walks out of the room.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to sit there with your hands folded and be quiet, and you're not supposed to talk. Right. So, of course, she comes in and she hears people talking. Right. And then she wants to know, all right, who spoke? Right. Who's the one who was talking? Of course, we're not going to,
no rats in your room, huh?
No rats in our room. Right. So she said, okay, then everybody's going to have to write 100 times. I will not talk when the nun leaves the room, when sister so-and-so leaves the room. I will not talk 100 times. And I remember going home to my mother and saying that I had this punishment I had to do. And she looked at me and said, well, you better get going. So well, I'm not going to do it. She goes, why not? Says, because I didn't do anything wrong. She goes, well, if you show up tomorrow without this done, you're going to get punished even further. I said, and then I'll do it because then I did something wrong. And my mother looked at me and said, on you. Okay. Now, that would never happen today.
No, because you'd never do it.
I'd never do it because my mother would be running into the school screaming and yelling at the nun saying, why are you making my son? She would be making my case instead of me sitting there thinking, no, that's not fair, and I'm not going to do it, and let me make my own decisions one way or the other.
Now, I know we're generalizing out there, so,
of course.
That's
what this is about.
Yeah, exactly.
But so you have to be self-aware. You have to control yourself, too. You have to make sure that you know your faults, and you try and contain your faults.
If you want to see a lack of self-regulation, just spool up Instagram and look at some reels. There's a lot of lack of self-regulation out there.
Yeah. There is no introspection there for sure.
Well, I think about it we live in a state that's notorious for how poor we drive, and road rage is a lack of self-regulation, right? For some reason, rage on the road just takes over.
Yeah. You have to be motivated, of course. So all of these things require effort. And not just being aware of yourself or being aware of how to control yourself, but you also have to be motivated to make change.
But I would say the metric on what motivation is very dependent, because what you and I might see is someone's need to be motivated, but their motivation is different, and then we judge that. But should we? I mean,
right. Well, that's part of the introspection that we talk about in the self-awareness, and empathy is another one where you have to have this understanding and recognizing what somebody else is going through. So you need that empathy. And then, of course, you need the skills to do everything that we just spoke about. So those are the key components of emotional intelligence: the self-awareness, the self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and the social skills to make it all work. It's not easy. No, this isn't something that's easy.
And there's this huge claim that, younger kids don't have social skills because they're on social media, ironically. What? And they don't have the interpersonal social skills of
face to face.
Everything on social media is true, right? No,
right.
But I saw this statistic that's
like Wikipedia.
Yeah, right. Something like 30% of younger generation are scared of phone calls.
Huh.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't know if that's true, but it's interesting because then you think, well, they don't really make phone calls. My nephews, they don't like phone calls. They like texting.
And it's okay to have, say, multiple ways to communicate. But when you restrict yourself to, one or two, and you don't expand your horizon, so to speak, you become very limited. And if you're not going through this process, and we know that this is something that's been around in one form or another for a very long time. And we've had these self-help gurus around forever. And Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins. Now, he was Anthony Robbins when I started. Now he's Tony Robbins. And all these, they're all in one way or another are saying the same thing, that you need to know yourself in order to know others, and start recognizing it as a process in life now more than ever, because of the detachment that we have through the technology that's available to us, including artificial intelligence. I mean, here's a quote: "I'm so smart that sometimes I don't understand a single word of what I'm saying." And it's so true, right?
Is that your quote?
That is not my quote, but artificial intelligence is bringing us to that point where sometimes we're saying things we don't even understand because the machine gave it to us.
anybody and everybody I talk to about AI and using it, they're all like, we're all going to be dumb in 10 years because we don't have to figure anything out.
The problem is 10 years from now, they won't even know they're that dumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Intelligence is knowing that tomato is a fruit and not putting it in a fruit salad.
Disgusting.
Yeah. So working with the emotional intelligence is important to deal with this on a day-to-day basis so that you can recognize where you are and develop these interpersonal skills. Oh my God.
But where and how do you develop those? That's a big question, isn't it?
It is. And it has a lot of places that we're constantly using it, and we may be good at it in one place, but not another. Maybe we're good with it with our friends, because we're all aware of this and we all talk about it, and we're good at communicating our feelings to each other in a sense and being sensitive to those feelings and not just saying, oh, whatever, oh, he's just a crybaby. These are all things that matter, and you have to really recognize that they impact people. Then you have your workplace relationships, which are, they could be totally different in how you deal with those people, because now you're in a more professional environment. You might have to limit what you say or how you say it, things like that. And then, of course, you have your personal relationships, which hopefully you do have some kind of high emotional intelligence with the person that you love most in this world and spend most of your time with, hopefully.
So it's funny, they say, if you're of faith, I prayed for God to give me this or give me that. Well, you might not necessarily just be injected with that ability. Right. You get the opportunity to work on that. So when you're talking about where do you find emotional intelligence, how do you work on it? It's not running away from those opportunities to work on it, and be okay with yourself to fail when you don't get it right.
You really have to recognize, all right, I'm going to say this directly to us.
He's looking right at me, so
you, yeah.
There's no mirror in here. So.
No, but we're not perfect. Really?
Well, I looked deep into myself.
Paul's crying now.
I looked deep in myself and I said, no, I am.
Yeah. He's wrong.
Yeah.
He's wrong. But
and I'm never wrong. So
I get amazed at people that are like in their 30s and 40s, and they have these behaviors that mimic what they hated most in their parents. And if you really can't get to the point where you're discussing it with them, it comes down to, my father did this and my mother did that and blah, 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 blah. And then you want to just look at them and say, you're 40 years old. Get over it, which is not a sign of emotional intelligence to say get over it.
Yeah.
But you're looking at a 40-year-old that has not gone through the process of trying to reconcile that, okay, my parents did that to me, so let me make sure I don't become the same way and do the same thing to my children. And that's what happens, right?
Yeah, the pendulum does swing the other way, typically.
Yeah, you have to go through this process of analyzing yourself so that you don't repeat. You don't want history to repeat when it comes to raising your children or having relationships in the workplace or having, your special relationships with the people that mean most to you. You don't want to use old tapes. They say old tapes, and you're playing, and tapes used to be how we used to record things back in the old days.
Yeah, I don't know what he was talking about.
You didn't know, yeah. But they're old it's old dialogue that just keeps coming around, and you govern and base your life's decision on old dialogue when you should be looking at that old dialogue and reconciling it and coming up with a new dialogue.
Tony Robbins calls it patterns and pattern breaking often, which I like because it is. I guess like anything that you start, it can be difficult to take those first steps. And if you fail quickly, you're going to be intimidated perhaps into not trying again. But you start somewhere, right? You put that first foot forward and try to find opportunities, big or small. And oftentimes I say, like if you clue somebody in, or like, public speaking, right, is like the number one fear. It probably still is like the number one fear.
Yeah, it's definitely right up there.
Right. But if you were to get out in front of people and tell them right away, I'm nervous about being here, you're automatically putting that crowd on your side because they know how that feels and they want to support you. So it's like if you're trying something new, if you're trying to work on something and you enlighten those people that you're working with about it, I would dare say oftentimes they're going to be behind you and want to support you in getting better at that.
And that's human nature, really. We do want to support each other as best we can, but if we can't relate, we can't support. And, how does this all matter in the world of all things chiropractic? Right? Well, I want you to think about where you would apply emotional intelligence. Certainly your office in general, you would say everything about your office. Well, you have to lead your office, right? You are the chief cook and bottle washer. You have to lead your office, which means you need these leadership skills. And part of your leadership skills is recognizing what your staff needs, recognizing what your patients need. You have to lead these people. And by understanding yourself and then having the skill to understand them, you're able to meet them at their level and make your relationship with them more successful. So when we say, what do you mean by more successful? It's like, well, they come in, they get well, they pay you in one form or another, they refer others to your practice, they talk well of you. I mean, all the positives that come from being a good leader in your practice. And you can't possibly be a good leader in your practice unless you have these emotional intelligence skills, so to speak.
Leadership doesn't come easy to everybody.
No.
My wife and I talk about it sometimes. She feels like, she's overlooked as a leader. I said that statement alone really does demonstrate, because someone like myself in a leadership role, I wouldn't be overlooked. If I wanted to be in a leadership role, I felt like I could help in that role, it would become apparent very quickly. And a lot of it isn't what you say, but it's your presence. It's how you. It's funny. There was this time. This is years ago. I was somewhere. I think it was at one of the casinos, and there was
Speaking of a leadership role.
Yeah.
It
was like a seminar or something, and because I think I was speaking or something. I was in a blazer and a tie. And I was with somebody and I said, watch this. Someone's going to think I work here and ask me something. She goes, what are you talking about? All I did was I buttoned my coat. I stood straight up and I just looked around in confidence. And like moments later, someone came up and asked me a question. I said, isn't it weird? Put the right setting, the right, appearance.
We just had this exact experience. Our good friend, Dr. Peter Kevorkian, is now the president of Life West College.
Life College West, yes.
Life College West. We went to his investiture.
Yeah.
So in the afternoon, we went to an assembly that they had, which was not the main event.
Right.
The main event was the night, that evening. And you and I were in our suits.
Yeah.
So we just, because we had to come from the hotel, we go there. All right, we're going to dress up and we'll just sort of roll right into the evening. And everybody kept coming up to us like we were somebody.
Yeah. Are you on the board? I don't even know what board they were talking about.
I don't even know what board, or you work here, you teach, or this, like, who are you?
And I was like, yes to anything they said.
But it was, we both walked away and said, wow, put a suit on and go into a crowd that isn't normally in a suit, and you are there.
You mean any chiropractic, anything?
So again, getting back to your practice, like we know that you should be a leader, but you also have to have emotional intelligence to resolve conflict. And we know it never happens in your practice that there's conflict with a patient or with a staff member or whatever. But if for those few that might have some conflict,
once in a while,
to be able to resolve this conflict and have it come out to be a win-win for both of you requires emotional intelligence.
Well, and that is a developed skill, I think. Conflict resolution is very challenging.
I don't agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. I hear what you're saying. I validate and I'm listening. You're dead wrong, but But
Jane, you ignorant slut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's a Saturday Night Live reference, FYI.
From way back.
Yeah, way back. But that in itself, trying to resolve a conflict sometimes could perpetuate an even deeper conflict if you're not diplomatic in your approach.
That's what these are skills. And we're not saying there's something that you're born with. We're saying that you might have the raw elements as part of your being, but you need to work at this. You need to develop that self-awareness. You need to develop, that self-regulation, that motivation. You have to work on empathy sometimes. It's important to recognize that it's not always just about you, Paul.
Wow. Okay, now, hey everyone, conflict resolution coming up because, wow.
He's trying to shut my mic off, so that's how he resolves the conflict. But then you have collaboration, which is really the outcome of it all, right? You find a way to work together. There's really, not everybody can be the leader or the boss or the king or whatever. Everybody has varying levels of participation, but in one way or another, you have to find a way to collaborate with each other.
Here's where, so I think collaboration is paramount in a lot of areas. In practice, it's obviously paramount because you need to work well with your staff and your associate doctors if you have them, and then your patients. Obviously, your patient care and healing is a collaboration between you and your patient. I think, right? You
Absolutely.
want them to buy in to what you're offering, but also in the profession. Like we've talked about this before, but it's always something that's on my mind is the lack of coalition that can happen in professions, and not just chiropractic, but why can't you find commonalities? When I've been working on the national stage in some areas of my profession, I'm a quagmire because I don't think they understand where I'm coming from. You can collaborate with people that you don't agree on a lot with, but if you can find a few things, it doesn't mean you're their best friend now.
Right.
But you can lean into the things that you have in common and understand the things you don't and come to a respectful boundary about those things.
All that shows emotional intelligence. We are standing there saying, no, I'm right, you're wrong, do it my way, or I'm taking my ball and going home.
Well, hurt feelings can be tough to overcome, especially if they're raw.
Right. Well, that's where the empathy comes in too, and being able to work with that. And again, we're going back to saying this isn't stuff that you're born with. This is stuff that you acquire through time and knowledge and experience and change. You have to be willing to change who you are. You have to, in part of that introspection, you recognize, well, geez, I'm easy to jump in and give my opinion as if it's the final word. And maybe I might have to teach myself to sit back and listen a little more. You know how they say you have two ears and one mouth, right? So,
well, willingness is one thing. But if one thing I have been taught watching these shows on hoarders, right?
Oh my God.
Is that they often break down and have a desire, a willingness, and a want to change. But then when the day of cleanup comes, they start reverting back into the don't throw this out, this has value. I mean, it could be rotting lettuce in a refrigerator and they just think, I'm going to use it.
Just cut the edges off. It's still good in the middle.
Yeah, and I honestly don't my wife would disagree, but I don't understand the hoarding mentality. She might think that I do a little bit. But the desire is where it starts, but it's the action steps and knowing that you can't do all this alone. You can't generate that kind of power to move forward by yourself, but there are tons of resources out there in all directions to start with.
Well, it's the same thing too. There was a point in my life I just had a lot of stuff. And you go, okay, my wife would look at me and say, do you need that? Well, you never know. There could be this or there could be that time. I wasn't a hoarder, but man, I had a lot of stuff. And she was very delicate through her emotional intelligence and making and making me initiate the process. And okay, well, why don't we just start with this and just start with the absolute things you'll never use. And, so we have the yeses, the nos, and the maybes kind of thing, And here we are, 10 years later, and we have pretty much purged out. She's the purge queen, but I mean, we're purged down to absolutely those things that we only need in our life. And, those few things that we like and want in our life, but we're not surrounded by stuff that when I pass or she passes or we both pass, someone else is going to have to put it in a dumpster. I'd rather be the one to make the decision what goes in the dumpster and what doesn't go in the dumpster. And that's kind of part of that learning process that I went through. That is a example of me becoming more emotionally intelligent.
Well, and one thing we didn't talk about, but I think has a lot to do with your success is grace. Now, grace first with yourself. That, as Dr. Davini said, nobody's perfect. And, do you know what the definition of perfect actually is?
No.
Complete. It doesn't mean right. Perfect is complete.
Complete.
Will we ever be complete? That's a good question. But give yourself the grace to fail, stumble. It's getting up, which really shows your determination. And also give that kind of grace, not just to yourself, but to others. The others that don't understand, they always say the further from home you get, the more of an expert you become.
Right.
If you're trying to change yourself, your inner circle is not going to know what to do with you. Right. They're not used to that. They're looking for the regular patterns, the old patterns. Even if what you want, they agree, is something that will be good for you, people gravitate to the familiar. So give them grace in their stumbles with trying to assimilate the new you, the progressive new you.
So how do we develop this emotional intelligence? It's simple. Just, explain
just do it.
Yeah, explain to me quantum physics in 30 seconds, right? But you do have to have a mindfulness, and we did talk about that you have to be aware of yourself and others. You have to be an active listener. 2 ears, 1 mouth.
Boy,
I know.
I have to say, there's people in my life that have, this is very challenging for them. I'm not going to say who. Just kidding. No, but the people in your life.
What'd you say?
Yeah, exactly. The ones that are just waiting to talk instead of listening to what you have to say. Isn't that annoying?
Are you done yet?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. You understand where I'm coming from right now. Yeah. But really, that can be. And if you think that you're a good listener, odds are you're the one that's got the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like that joke that comedian's like, he says, oh, there's always that crazy one in the family. And he says, if you think there's no crazy one in your family, it's you.
Exactly. Right. So be an active listener. Okay. You do have to have the self-reflection. That's what we talked about. And you have to be willing to seek feedback. I think that's the hardest part. And feedback is another nice way of saying what? Criticism.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
None
true.
of us like that,
Actually, not in all circumstances, because when we teach class, whether it's individually or our own classes, or we teach something together, I always fly right by all the positive remarks on the evaluation. Mm-hmm. I want to know what I could improve on.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
And I do the same
Tell it
thing.
To my face, I might cry, but I want to know.
No, I do the same thing, but that doesn't mean it's easy. We have made ourselves do that. And maybe in the beginning, we only wanted to hear the good stuff just to get us through those beginning phases. But now, as we try and progress and become better at what we do want to hear the criticism, or we do want criticism if it's out there. We don't want to hear it, but we will listen to it.
It's not that I won't get mad about it, or I'll laugh because someone will say something positive like the temperature in the room was perfect, and someone else will say it was freezing, and then someone else will say it's hot.
Right.
And it's like,
we have to analyze that. We always get this when we put on seminars. Oh, well, I don't like giving up my Saturdays and Sundays. So then you have Saturday. Oh, I know, but Saturday's an important due date. Then you go Sunday. Oh, but Sunday's my family day. So, okay, let's move them to Fridays. Oh, why don't you have them on the weekend?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
you can't please everybody.
And that's what I mean. It takes a lot of understanding to recognize that you can't please everybody. Yeah. So where in the process do you say, This is what I am. This is what I do. And this is how we do it. Would you like it? And your job is to say yes or no. And that's it. That's where we go. That's practice, right? You offer something to patients. They have to say yes or no to what you offer. But when they start making you change what you offer because you're so insecure that you're trying to meet their needs at the expense of your needs and your practice's needs, that's wrong.
Bikram from Bikram Yoga, Bikram used to say, if you go north, they'll say, why didn't you go south? If you go east, they'll say, why didn't you go west?
Right.
You can't please everybody.
Can't please
you
everybody.
cannot. But own who you are, own where you want to go, and don't do it alone.
Right. It's exactly that. And, I think that's a nice place to call it a day.
Well, you have this interesting, I don't know if you want to say this thing.
Go ahead.
No, you say it.
Intelligence is like underwear. It's important to have, but not necessary to show it off. But today, underwear
have you
is
seen these kids and how they wear stuff?
That's why I'm debating it, saying, I don't know. Today, underwear is outerwear. So, but either way, we want you to be smart with a heart.
Smat with a hat.
Smart with a hat.
I love it. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
I'm Dr. Mark Davini. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.